to this important program. My name is Dr. Thomas Boabin. I teach at the University of Ghana Business School in Accra, Ghana. I'm very happy for the opportunity to share with you a very important subject. And this subject is so critical because some believe that it is the bane of the problem of Africa. And so over the next hour or so, we're going to spend time to look at and discuss it critically. And the subject is ethics. Ethics. The subject of ethics is very important, and to help us to be able to digest it, to exhaust it, it has been organized under 3 models. And the first is what we're going to talk about. That is ethical leadership. And then we have the 2 other important models. So the model 1, what are we trying to achieve? We hope to acquire tools, something that we can use so that in our day-to-day activities, in our office behavior and decision-making, we can come out with decisions that are acceptable to society, which we describe as ethical decisions. Again, this discussion is supposed to give us the opportunity to explore ethical reasoning and decision-making in our day-to-day lives, not just in offices, but also what we do when we go out of offices. Whenever we are confronted with dilemma, predicaments, we are confused between wrong and evil, and the forces attracting us to do what is wrong are so strong. Hopefully this should be able to guide us to make right decisions and right choices. This model is further divided into 3 important sessions. We're first going to try and understand the concept of ethical leadership. What is it? And after that, we look at why must we try to be ethical as leaders? What is the importance or relevance of ethical leadership? And the final one, some kind of guide, suggestions, recommendations as to how we can actually practice ethical leadership. So first, let's try and understand the meaning of ethical leadership. There is a scenario that I want all of us to read and use it to start our discussion. Let's assume you are a director of a community-based human services organization that has several branches in several towns or villages. Your main source of funding is having budget crisis, which is threatening to reduce your funding by 30%. The head of the funding agency suggests to you or recommends to you that, don't worry, just close down a couple of branches. That means that first, you are going to lay off dedicated staff of these 2 branches, and secondly, you are going to deny the services to the several communities and the groups of people that have come to rely on you, and they rely on you because they trust you. Perhaps more important, it means deciding among several communities, to all of which you've made a commitment. How do you handle the situation? This is an ethical question. Even if you decide to close down the 2, which 2 are you going to close down? And that is what we're trying to understand, to be able to come out with the best decision with little or minimum consequences, that is ethical decision making. So what then is ethical leadership? We are talking about leaders of organizations who take initiatives, who make decisions that, 1, reflect the best interest of majority of the people with minimum consequence. That is it. And we need to understand that all over the world, including in our communities, in our countries, leaders always are faced with dilemma. They are mostly torn between choosing among alternatives. And so it is important for us to understand that the decisions leaders make, as well as the way by which these decisions are made, determine whether or not the leaders may be described as ethical. And it could be even at the family level. Whatever we do, we have to make sure that we are ethical. There are some concepts that in the course of the discussion we are likely to encounter, and so we need to understand. Values, for instance. When we talk about the value, we are talking about the tendency, the likelihood for us to use something in us, mostly in our culture or our belief, as a basis of interacting with the world. And so each and every one of us has the value, which is usually formed around age 10, and it guides our action. We have morals, which includes customs, traditions, and beliefs that are reflected in personal conviction about right and wrong, simply because we relate to others. There is a standard, there is a definition of what constitutes right and wrong because of the presence of others. And ethics, which is from the Greek word ethiko, simply means standards of right and wrong that influence our behavior. And so we all know if the behavior is right, we say that it is ethical. If it is wrong, we say that it is unethical, inappropriate. I want us to look at a very important aspect of ethical leadership. There are two elements of ethical leadership. The first is acting, and the second is leading. What it means is that if you are an ethical leader, it must reflect in your day-to-day activities. Whatever you do, whatever you say, must be ethical. In that sense, we say that there is acting. The man is acting as ethical leader. And then we have the leading. There are some people who act ethically, but they are not able to guide others, to drive others to also behave ethically. In that sense, the person is not a complete ethical leader. And then we can also look at this from a second aspect, that is the visible and then the invisible aspect of ethical leader. When we talk about the visible aspect, we are talking about the action, the things that manifest, the things that we do, people see. And then the invisible one is innate, it's within us. What is in you that informs that behavior that you put up? What is it that you have in your mindset that helps you to think the way you think? And so these two must come together before we can have ethical leadership. And I want us to discuss this further by using this simple structure, this simple figure. And you can see it has 4 boxes, and the top is labeled moral person. And then the side is labeled moral leader. And under moral person, we have 4 different boxes. And then under moral leader, we have 4 different boxes. What it means is that if you take a moral person, the column that has weak from top to down means that morally the person is weak. What it means is that the value system of this person, the thinking, the person's judgment is not as expected by society. They are not ethical. And the right column that has strong suggests that this person is more or less ethically upright. And so don't be confused about the strong column with 2 divisions and one of them with a question mark. We will discuss that. And so that is a moral person. So a moral person is someone who possesses within himself these ethical qualities and is able to demonstrate in his day-to-day activities. Some are weak and others are very strong. And then let's look at a moral leader. A moral person doesn't necessarily translate into a moral leader. But to be a moral leader, you must first and foremost be a moral person. Who then is a moral leader? Again, if you look at the roles, you can see strong and then the weak. The strong has two boxes, but don't be confused. They are all the same from the first left to the right. And what it means is that there are some people who are very strong moral leaders. I will explain who a moral leader or strong moral leader is. And there are some who are very weak moral leaders. A moral leader is a person who, in addition to possessing ethical qualities, demonstrating them and allowing these ethical standards to guide his or her decisions, also ensures that all those around him practices the same. All those who are surrounded or who are working with him also do practice these same qualities. So a moral leader is a person who uses his or her moral personality to influence others who are around him, both superiors, subordinates, and colleagues. And as I said earlier on, there are some who are moral, but they fail to pass that on to followers or colleagues. And so it is very important for us to understand that being a moral person doesn't necessarily guarantee that the person becomes a moral leader. But one must first and foremost be a moral person before the person can become a moral leader. So now let's go into why we have 4 boxes. If a person is a moral person, very strong moral person, but the person is not able to influence others to exhibit moral standards, that is where we have the question mark. And so we'll come to that here. Where we have the question mark, the person is very strong personality. You will not see anything wrong. His judgment, his actions, the way he talks to people, fairness, all these, we'll later on look at the qualities of an ethical leader. This person has everything, but everything is confined to himself or herself alone. When it comes to influencing others, the person, in terms of moral leader, the person is weak. We'll come to that. But then we have some who are morally corrupt, very weak, but they are able to force people to do things that are moral. Don't do this, do that, according to the Bible and that. And so, if the person is a Muslim, according to Quran, the person will use these things that are very useful, that are ethical, and impose them on people around him or her. But for him or her to practice them is out. So this person, in terms of moral personality, is very weak, but insists that people lead ethical, moral leadership lifestyle. And so we say that once you have weak moral personality and you are insisting that people should exhibit moral standards, such a person is a hypocrite. So we have hypocritical leaders. What it means is that they know what is right. They force others to do, but they themselves will never do them. And then we have some that we describe as unethical leaders. Unethical leaders are very weak morally, and they don't also ask or require people who are around him or her to behave ethically. So the leader himself is corrupt morally, and all those around him, whenever they are doing anything wrong that is unethical, he doesn't see the need to correct them, and so anything goes. So there's weak personality and there's weak leadership, and we say that is unethical leader. That person doesn't qualify to be a leader. And then we have the strong ethical leader. Very important. And that is what we are all aspiring to become. Here, the person is morally upright, and given the opportunity, this person will ensure that all those working with him, superiors, colleagues, and subordinates, also live ethical life. And so we say the person has very strong moral personality and very strong moral leader? Yes, the question mark is very important to us because most of the time that is what several leaders do. They are ethically neutral. Why? Because even though they know it, they practice it, but they are not able to enforce, they are not able to ensure that those around them do this. It is very common in Africa to find our leaders who, by themselves, by their own standards, will not necessarily involve themselves in wrongdoings, in unethical behaviors. They will never try to steal money or corrupt wise. They are okay, they live by, they won't say certain words, they won't use certain words on citizens, they won't insult, by all standards. But when their appointees are doing it, they keep quiet. So we say that such a person is ethically a neutral person, and that is not good. That is not good. That person is not a moral, sorry, is not ethical leader. He is a neutral person. I don't want to hurt people. I don't want to step on toes, but I'll make sure I do whatever I'm doing to meet the standards. So as young leaders, it is important for us to ask the question, where do we want to be? I know obviously no one would like to be an unethical leader because you will later find out the definition of a leader. You must. But the difficulty is, are we able to influence others to also exhibit the same traits as we do exhibit? And there are some examples that some of them, I think all of us will agree. And this is a man that we all know, we cherish, we admire, even though late now, and we're talking about Nelson Mandela, who by all standards, we all agree and we accept that even though he wasn't an angel, he himself admitted that he was not without weakness. But I think everything that was humanly possible for this man to exhibit ethical leadership, he did. And so that is why we have him there. And the quote is by Desmond Tutu, Archbishop Desmond Tutu of South Africa. And he said, we need leaders like Madiba. We need people who are not there for what they can get out. They are there for the sake of the people. And in the course, you get opportunity to watch 4 or 5 minutes a video of this man. And so, yes, what about someone who is unethical? So the ethical and then the unethical, the two extremes. And there is a description here by a former president of Zanzibar. And he is this outspoken man, and he said, it is unfortunate that many leaders in Africa put their personal interests first, and always the national or people issues are ignored. So what he's telling us is that any leader who is always interested in achieving personal goals can never be an ethical leader. And he continues that it is a pity that Africa still has leaders who do not want to respect their country's constitutions. The signs are clear. Such leaders always think they are superior compared to other citizens. It is wrong perception that undermines growth of democracy. That is one attribute of an unethical leader. They think that they are the only wise people in this world. Without them, nothing should happen. And so, after serving the constitutional term, they want to amend constitution, they want to continue in power. In the same way, in our own small ways, there are so many. You don't see the reason why you are occupying a position and you should not be replaced. You don't understand. No, because you are there and it is wrong. It is unethical. We need to agree that we are human. Others could be better, or if nothing at all, let's share. Let's share. And so because we are all serving a common interest. And then we have the hypocritical leader. We need to discuss. You can see what he says is different from what he does. He will ensure that people do the right thing, but he himself will always do whatever he wants. They talk about ethics, religion, yet there are enough evidence that they always engage in more practices, they steal money, and they do all kinds of things. And so such a person is a hypocritical. We have so many hypocritical people in this part of the world. We don't live by our own set standards. As people say that we don't walk our talk, we say it. And that is why sometimes I question myself, why is it that in Africa we have certain phrases that when you go to other parts of the world, you don't find them? We talk about ideally and the normal sense. When we say that, what we are saying is that there is something that we can do, but we are doing something different. It's very important. And we have the ethically neutral, as I explained. The person exhibits high moral traits, but fails to transfer same to the organization or community he or she is leading. Which one do we prefer? And which one do we think we can exhibit? Preference, if we prefer and we are not able to take steps to become that, then we become hypocritical. And so it is important for us, and we can't also say that because we can't do it, then you will be unethical leaders. No, then we have no business in leadership. We need to strive to become ethical leaders. Yes. And so it is important for us to understand, and I'll spend some time here to explain, that before, it is not about you believing that you are ethical leader. No. Ethical leadership cannot be hidden. Because, as I said, we are talking about two things. You demonstrating. Sometimes you don't even know, and people will see you and they will discuss it, and you have that perception, you have that understanding that this person is ethical. And so we need to be perceived as ethical leaders. And to do that, we must be visibly ethical. That is, we must demonstrate. And we must also be invisibly ethical. That is, deep down, whatever informs. Garbage in, garbage out. It's a decision-making model, which I believe you all know. What you put in determines what comes out. So whatever is in us, that is bringing out the behavior, must also be ethical. Otherwise, we become hypocrites. And so, in summary, as we conclude this part, before we go to the remaining two, we will say that being a moral person alone is inadequate. Being a moral person is a necessary condition, but it is never sufficient. And so we need to distance ourselves from most employees and without people who are not moral. And how do we do that? We need to concentrate on our own moral traits. And being a moral manager is also not sufficient. We need to combine the two. Or a moral leader. You're a moral leader because you teach people. And you're a moral person because you exhibit it. We need to combine the two. We exhibit it and we teach people what is morality. So thank you very much. Let's reflect. We know our own weaknesses so that from today we start exhibiting traits that befit moral leaders and moral persons. And that makes us ethical leaders. Thank you.